Thank you all for joining the session. I'd first like to start off by thanking the team from Data 2030 Summit for this great event, bringing together people all over the world talking about a very important subject. Data is key for our economies today. And before I start diving into my presentation, I'd like to first congratulate the UAE government, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, for this great achievement. The UAE had a successful mission launching the space to space and the Hope mission, which is very close to the heart, to our hearts in the Arab world. Before I start talking about data innovation and in this age of the digital revolution, we're all facing a crisis today. And with COVID, this crisis has increased tenfold. Today, we're living a time of information overload. In governments, it's very challenging to make sense of this vast amount of data that's out there. But there is a solution to this problem. And in my opinion, the solution is to start looking and use our eyes to gather all of the data we need, to make sense of those data, and to come up with insights to create better cities, better nations, and a better world. At the beginning, I'd like to just touch upon some of the innovations that happened over this digital revolution. There is an exponential growth that is changing business models all over the world. We see this with the new platform economy that's being introduced to the market. We see this with all of these different platforms. And there's some platforms that had incremental innovation, so over time. But today we're in the world of disruption, where we see players coming into play, such as Uber, where they disrupted the whole ecosystem of using driver services or taxiing. So how can we really make sense of all of this disruption? Now, this notion has been said over and over again. Data has become the new oil. But if we look back from the beginning of the revolutions that happened, the first revolution that talked about the need of gathering food at the beginning of time, then to the economic revolution that looked at the agriculture industry, etc., till today, where we see this digital world coming into play. But all of these revolutions or changes started with one innovation that brought it all together. We started off in the first revolution with the steam engine. Second revolution talked about the electricity and automation, assembly lines. The third revolution really looked at the computing and the internet. And today, this is the revolution of data. And in my opinion, data is allowing us to use all of these new technologies. Today we hear about Internet of Things. Today we hear about smart solutions. Today we hear about artificial intelligence. And these are all tools and solutions whereby the backbone of it is really driven by data and the interconnectability of these different data sources. Today in the government, we really try to take a look at all of these different changes and try to build one of the most digital and forward-thinking governments. The data ecosystem doesn't stop by the national statistic offices or all around the world. Now, for us in the FCSC, we really look at not only gathering statistics and data, but also how can we make the UAE leaders in different domains, whether it is healthcare, whether it was education, whether it was digital government and digital services. But in any NSO or data, national data offices, there is many providers of that data. Some of them come from government agencies. Some of them come from international organizations and civil society. But where we saw the shift in the past couple of years, whereas in the past, the government used to house most of the data, whether it was from census, whether it was from all the admin records available in the government. But today, the shift has moved tremendously to taking in the private sector. And today, the private sector holds most of our data. Today, everyone has a mobile phone. And the data that's being collected from these phones are stored in the telecommunication providers, not in the government. So we're really trying to take a look at how can we leverage all of these data and all of these partners to create a better ecosystem and better lives for the people in the UAE and around the world. So what is the concept of data monetization and the data ecosystem? There's a lot of people talking about this new trend. The data economy is a wave that's been driven by technology. And with technology, there's more and more data being stored. But where we see the shift is that governments and nations and the private sector entities are being very smart on how to monetize this data. Today, we saw all of the scandals that happened around Facebook and WhatsApp. And those companies not only taking advantage of the data available, but also using it in the elections or vice versa. But we need to think about all of these different nations and what it means by living in a data monetization or stream of business. So around the world, in Canada, and US, and the UK, and France, and China, and even in Dubai, we see there are clear profits that will happen with the rise of data. And with governments, we really need to think about how can we utilize the data that's available to create better policy for our citizens. Maybe today the largest industries in the data economy are the banking and financial services. We hear a lot about fintech and financial technologies, manufacturing, healthcare. Today we see the huge push for digital doctors and people really not wanting to go into the medical centers because they're scared of the COVID, etc. But the data starts from all of you. We're all producing data some way or another with our smartwatches, with our smart shoes, with our interaction with technology. An individual today creates more than 2.3 zettabytes of data, which is a huge amount. And most use different platforms, whether it was buying things we like from Amazon, or talking to our friends via our mobile phones, or looking at our favorite pictures through social media, Instagram, etc. And what happens is the data flow comes from you to these huge cloud storage that's all around the world and is being stored. And once the data is stored in these cloud providers, the platforms that have been used, such as Facebook, can create algorithms. They can sell data Today, there's a new economy where data is a commodity, and they sell it to the third party suppliers or people who are collecting those data. Once that data is being collected, the stream moves on to whether it was reselling the same data that you produced to the government or to other businesses so they can monetize and advertise better, and also to research institutes where the innovation happens. And we see this data journey really coinciding in many applications, such as I mentioned, fintech, agritech, to create smarter cities. And in the government, we really use this data to create data-driven policies and data-driven decision-making. In 2015, the United Nations saw that there is a gap, and there's a huge gap in different nations in achieving this holistic vision of the world, where no one is being left behind. The United Nations launched the Sustainable Development Goals that houses 17 goals that you see in front of me, and they look at different sectors, whether it was education, having quality education, gender equality, the best infrastructure, more sustainable cities, and lessen the hunger rate around the nations. So to achieve all of these goals, there are a set of targets, more than 200 plus targets to be able to achieve those goals. Now, any target you put in place or a KPI, you need to be able to measure it. And the measurement framework is data. So if we are not able to collect these different data, it's going to be very hard for the UAE and different nations to come together and present their cases on how they try to achieve those different goals. Now, measurement is one of the key pillars of what we try to do at FCSC. And we are today the Secretariat of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. We work with different partners all over, from the Ministry of Education to the Ministry of Climate Change, to the local offices in the UAE. But the difference today is there's a huge competition, and data access is somewhat becoming a monopoly, where it only resides in a few agencies or a few platforms or companies that houses this huge data. Maybe in the past, as we know, there is no AI without data, and today there's a race to artificial intelligence. Around the world, different nations are competing with who can create the best algorithms, who can create the best data enabling ecosystem, and with the mindset, winner takes all. Today we see this clearly, and we see this challenge in China companies and the US companies, where we have Alibaba, and instead of that, there's Amazon. So we see this dynamics of, if we as nations do not produce data in such a way, and we don't open the data, we're going to have challenges as AI algorithms run across data, and the training models also use data. And if you are not included in that data, you might be lost as a nation or as different individuals. Now, with this new innovation in data and new trends coming into play, there is a need for purple skills people. Purple skills are people who have the right tools and capabilities to leverage this huge amount of data and create insights. Today, the hottest job is a data scientist. But not only that, for the future, we need to think differently and we need to be able to leverage these different skill sets. There is a competition in every NSO or NSI, National Statistic Office, where the traditional IT approach of very focused, streamlined, operational, to this new approach where it needs agility and transform all of our data products into something that today the decision makers can need. So what are we really doing in the UAE? I talked about the data, I talked about people, and I talked about technology. When these three come into play, we can create the most smartest data-centric government in the world. And this is what we're striving for. So what are we currently doing in the UAE to support the future and future trends? The UAE launched the Vision 2021 7 years ago in order to create a more sustainable nation and to be one of the top nations in all sectors. The UN launched the 2030 and the UAE is a part of these nations who adopted the agenda. The UAE has also launched the UAE Centennial 2071, which is really taking that vision to be among the best countries to the UAE really having a forward-thinking approach to be the #1 country and to be a benchmark to the world in these different sectors. The UAE has also launched the 4th Industrial Revolution Strategy and the Artificial Intelligence Strategy with the appointment of His Excellency Omar Al-Ulama, who is currently the Minister for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Economy in the UAE. So on a strategic level, our government really is putting into place the roadmap for what needs to be done in terms of the future and future technologies. So in FCSC, we really took that vision that the government set and we tried to utilize it in different domains. And we really believe that business as usual is no longer acceptable. Maybe in the past, the ministers and the policymakers, they can wait to get access to some data, but today this is no longer the case. There is a very much need to fast data, to more real-time data, rather than having very slow processes and data that has been stored previously. We also see the notion of 70% accurate is fine, as long as the decision makers have the data available when is needed. So we looked at all of our processes internally, from the data collection and the automation, the data processing, live customer engagement, and to create interactive insights. And to innovate in the area of data, you have to have some features that we call. First of all, an innovative challenge or an innovative solution to a challenge you're trying to solve, cost reduction, goal-oriented, engagement with the different stakeholders in the government. As in the UAE, we are a federated system. So we have 7 local statistic offices that we work with. We have different federal and local ministries that we work with on a sector-to-sector basis. And the most importantly is time reduction and the right insights for our leaders. So what are some of the projects that we worked on in FCSC? We started off in 2017 to really create a roadmap of what will statistics and data ecosystem look like in the next 4 years. And our vision was to become the best nation in smart statistics. Maybe while other nations look at their legacy systems or the way they do business, the UAE has had really an area where we can improve and we can build the future. So we started off by identifying some of the gaps and really solving them by many of our initiatives. Now I'll just touch upon some of the initiatives that we worked on in FCSC. The first initiative was Meidani. Meidani is one of the platforms and that was launched in 2017 in order to create one portal for all surveys that's happening in the UAE. Now, it's a very flexible tool. It allows us to track surveyors. It allows us to identify challenges in real time. Another project that we launched is Bayanati.ae, which is the open data portal of the UAE, because we saw the need of providing this vast amount of data that's located in the government to the community. We also worked on one of the big projects using mobile data with the ITU and came up with very new methodologies and insights on how can you really leverage mobile data to create some indicators in the ICT and some tourism indicators. Now, when it comes to 2018, there was a direct request from His Excellency to really change the way we collect and utilize the admin data in the government. And we came up with the Emirates Data Network, which is a network of partners, different government agencies, to really come together and create the best and most updated registries in the government. Today, we house one of the registries, which is called the Social Statistics Registry, and it houses information on people who want benefits from the government. We worked in 2019 to really explore and utilize the data collection mechanism, which is Meidani, and the admin data collection, which is the Emirates Data Network, and to really create an ecosystem of new tools and new analytics, where we created a project in collaboration with some of the geospatial entities to detect the green areas in the UAE and the palm trees. In 2020, with COVID, that didn't stop us, actually. It really improved the need for data, as some of the NSOs really struggled in this time, whereas the UAE and the projects that the infrastructure we had in place really supported in being able to provide the decision maker the data that they need. One of the key projects that we worked on was the Open Data Race. It's a positive competition between government entities to come together and really open their data. In less than 50 days, we were able to collect, analyze, and restructure more than 277 data sets, and that is now available in Bayanati.ae, which is the open data portal. But we created new products such as the COVID Rapid Insights that I'll talk about in the next slides. Today, dashboards is no longer trendy. We see the trend moving more of data stories or data narratives. And we are working closely with many different organizations to come and to produce analytical tools that can support their decision making. Today, we have one of our tools that is being used with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to try to speed up their reporting process. Other dashboards look at stories from the UAE and really give our makers insight on what's happening in those different areas. The second project that I'll talk about is the big data spending behavior insights. Now, we know that data is available, but in times of COVID, we really had challenges in gathering this data that's out there. But that didn't stop us. We worked closely with our partners from the credit card network in order to create one of the new products that we have, which is called the Rapid Reports. And now our leaders can really see what is the impact of COVID throughout these few weeks. We can see from the graphs that we can see the share of the spending, what's increasing and what's decreasing. One of the fascinating insights is that once the UAE opened up a little bit, and in time of Eid, we saw the spending increase and booming in the northern Emirates, which is Ajman, Fujairah, and Ras Al Khaimah. We can also look at spending per sector and different nationalities using this data. Today, UK citizens are spending more on hotels, retails, airlines, etc. So this is when the UAE government think fast and try to really support the policymakers. FCSC is ready for the future. Now, the last project that I'll talk about is the UN Global Platform for Big Data. Today, the UAE signed an MOU with the United Nations to host one of the first regional hubs in the world. And this is catering for all the Arab region. This hub is merely to support creating innovative methods, innovative learnings, and really trying to collect data from different nationalities and different private sector entities. And it's a cloud-based platform where people from different nations can come together and work and create algorithms together. Today, we have more than 273 experts that is supporting the global UN initiative. And also, we are building the local initiative, which is the UAE Regional Hub. To end my presentation, we all have a decision to make, and each one of you have a decision to make today. It's either we can stand on the sidelines and watch other countries and nations build the future of data and data analytics, or we can work collectively and contribute to designing our future. And this is what we're trying to do at FCSC. So thank you so much, and I'm available for any questions.